How's it going, Kyle? Great to see you.
Yeah, awesome to be here. Thank you.
So, what have you been up to these days? I know you have been so busy. You've been slaying it as a raider. You've been helping out as a smart contract developer everywhere. So what's kind of up with Cal Stargarden these days, and what's up with the future of service DAOs?
Well, man, yeah, I've been putting in some work. I kind of got my start as a smart contract developer working on Hack Money with a squad of hackers that we put together in Metagame. So it's pretty safe to say that without Metagame, I wouldn't be doing the stuff that I'm doing today. And so in that way, I kind of see metagame as an informal service DAO to the DAO ecosystem. We have tons of people come through metagame and they're like, what the fuck is metagame? And then 6 months to 12 months later, they're maybe not as active on metagame anymore, but they're working inside One Hive or Raid Guild or Common Stack or the Taoist or DAO House. I mean, I can kind of go on. There's so many places for talented contributors to like dig into Web3 and make a name for themselves. And you know, a lot of those spaces aren't as inclusive as metagame, and so metagame ends up being this starting point on the journey where people come in to sort of prove themselves and pick up the basic skills that they need to move into a full-time career in Web3. So yeah, that's what I've been doing. I recently joined the fourth cohort over at Raid Guild, and I believe there's like 134 cohort applicants, and I was the first person out of that group of 134 cohort members to actually get a Raid Guild membership. So on the inclusivity spectrum, Raid Guild is like on the opposite side of that spectrum from metagame, where metagame's like, metagame is the America, the United States of DAOs. Like, bring us your hungry, your tired masses, and we'll sort of nurture them until they're incredibly effective in the Web3 space. Raid Guild is like, out of 134 people that applied to get into Raid Guild, I want to say under 10 have actually become Raid Guild members so far. And so that kind of brings me to what I want to talk about, which is, all these different service DAOs, what are their mechanics? How do they function? Where do they fall on the inclusivity or exclusivity spectrum? And kind of take a look at like, especially the models that are already working. We'll start with Raid Guild. Raid Guild is essentially the original service DAO. Raid Guild was started over 2 years ago to be this decentralized. Oh yeah, let me share my screen. That might help. So Raid Guild was created to be this decentralized sort of developer shop. The idea was that it would contain elite talent, and it would enable any one who needed some type of Web3 product designed, built, engineered, deployed, all these different things would allow them to just, take their Web3 ideas, go to Raid Guild, build an MVP or a, in some cases a longer term development package. But a lot of times we have people come through that just want to get their idea to an MVP, and then they want to go after seed funding. They skip the pre-seed allocation in favor of just having like the application built for them. So Raid Guild kind of works like this. We have a token and a consultation queue. So people that want development work from Raid Guild, they put themselves onto a consultation queue, which is an on-chain mechanic that basically signals to the DAO how ready the client is to get work done and how competitive they're willing to be, because Raid Guild is often, Raid Guild is often like overbooked. I mean, now that we're sliding into a bear market, it's not as crazy, but 3 months ago there was nearly 20 projects in the consultation queue that we didn't even have like room to basically work on. So, and Raid Guild does a lot of things: consultation, design, full stack development, marketing. The idea is after we do a consultation, we build a scope for the client. The client can look at the scope. There's a certain amount that they basically pay for us to build the scope in case they want to take that scope to a different development shop. And if they like the full scope for the project, then they put their funds for the project into a smart escrow, which is essentially an escrow service that is, again, on chain. It releases payments in certain milestones as tasks get completed. And if there's ever any problems, either Raid Guild or the client can freeze the escrow and say, hey, like, there's a problem. We're not, things aren't getting done the way that we thought they would get done, in which case we have arbitration sort of programmed into the system. And so LexDAO takes over, and their legal engineering team actually arbitrates disputes for us and for our clients. I've actually never seen that happen, but I imagine that it will be really handy. So to summarize, Raid Guild is a highly exclusive Web3 development agency and consultancy that is just designed to create real value for clients, and that's, again, something that is a huge problem in blockchain and Web3, which is that we have people coming in with a great idea, and then they pull 10 to 20 million dollars. They capture 10 to 20 million dollars in value from their community and sometimes from investors, and then they never produce any real tangible value. And they're like, well, I guess I'm retired now. Web3 is great. And obviously that's just not how it should be. So that's sort of the mechanics of Raid Guild. I'm going to move through a slew of different service DAOs and talk about how different the mechanics can be. So another one that's really interesting to me right now is Code Arena. Code Arena is basically a decentralized auditing firm. So smart contract audits are in crazy high demand. There's just not enough people that know how to do these audits for how many people need these audits done. Obviously, the audits have probably saved billions and billions of dollars in terms of hacks and value, like, safeguarded. So what makes Code Arena so much different than a conventional auditing company is a conventional auditing company might say, like, okay, we've looked at how big your code base is, give us $50,000 and we will audit your smart contract code. So at that point, after they receive funding, a typical auditing company would have 2 or maybe 3 guys review your code, record all of the findings, and then send you an audit report. What makes Code Arena so different is on Code Arena, you create a contest for however many dollar value. And then there are about 30, 40, or even like 50 smart contract auditors who will go through your code base and create reviews. So instead of getting one security review, you actually get like an aggregated security review that comes from dozens of different participants. So far we've seen this working, and we've seen it working better. Companies get a better value for their dollar. The high quality auditors they're actually called wardens in Code Arena. They make great money. And then all the people who are wardens who participate but maybe didn't find that many security issues or didn't find unique security issues, they still kind of make money, and they make some money, but the idea is they're making money and learning how to be a security auditor. So really cool stuff. But I guess the important part is how different the mechanic is for Code Arena versus Raid Guild. Raid Guild, a client has a very specific thing they want done. They come in, they get a consultation, we do a design sprint, and suddenly they have a scope that tells them exactly what they need to build their I should say what they need to slay their product demon. In Code Arena, a lump sum of money is put up as sort of a bounty, and then the work on it is decentralized. So it's just a very different mechanic. And I think we're going to see a lot of awesome experimentation moving into the future on exactly how service DAOs accomplish their core objectives, and exactly what types of incentive structures and sort of like tokenomic mechanics lead to higher quality outcomes and just more value creation. So I'm just going to keep moving through some of these service DAOs and talk about Prime DAO a little bit. So Prime DAO has a few things that are really interesting. And I'm not going to talk too much about the deep technical side of what Prime DAO has going on, but it's really cool. They built a suite of tools that allow DAOs to engage in a lot of the, well, I shouldn't say a lot, but many different like conventional sorts of business deals together. Liquidity swaps, joint liquidity provisioning ventures, basically the kinds of things that normal corporations do, the kinds of agreements or orders that normal companies put together and work on. But with Prime DAO, they built smart contract tooling that allowed DAOs to do those things. But I want to talk about Prime Rating. So Prime Rating is essentially a decentralized scoring mechanic for different projects that are online. So a lot of times in the blockchain space, it's really, really hard to identify whether a project, like how safe, how legitimate is a project. Again, like I said, founders jump into the Web3 space and bull markets and they put $10 million into their own pocket without ever delivering anything. So I think that these sort of decentralized rating mechanics are really impactful. Like you can go through this list and you can see like, oh, look, look at all of these blockchain protocols that are up here in the 80s. Like these are the kinds of things that you can sort of trust, more so than, let's say you scroll down here to, oh, look, Spaghetti Money has a 24 Prime rating. Like maybe that's not a great idea. Dracula Protocol 35. That's probably not good. I'm surprised Hex got a 39 rating. You would think that Hex would be sort of the model that you compare trust against. Like you start with Hex as a baseline 1. So that really kind of scares me about every protocol that's under there. But anyways, so we've got a few different things happening. In Prime ratings, you're crowdsourcing wisdom from people to create this kind of new product. In Code Arena, you're crowdsourcing work from different people. In Raid Guild, you're pretty much just using on-chain coordination mechanics to solve issues and allow people to function and work together in an ad hoc organization that just basically was never possible before, multi-sigs and DAO treasuries and stuff like that. So I want to look at Risk DAO too. So Risk DAO is this new upcoming service DAO for risk and research analysis for decentralized finance and lending protocols. So I'm sure a lot of people out there with the sort of explosion or implosion rather of Luna and Terra, you can see that it's pretty important for us to have better tools for analyzing risk. And so I'm curious about this Risk DAO. I don't know exactly how their mechanics work yet, or how well established they are so far. But I am curious because basically every new service DAO is going to represent some kind of degree of innovation. And ideally we have, we have more service DAOs pop up, more little innovations, and we can sort of go through these different innovations and cherry pick them to build better service DAOs. So there's this article right here from Peter Pan that talks about essentially, unbundling venture capital. And it talks a lot about service DAOs and incubation DAOs and investment DAOs. And I think that a lot of the first generation DAOs are going to end up in the venture capital and incubation side of things, like Metagame, Raid Guild, all of these organizations that have already been around for 2 or 3 years are basically the only experts in the world on the inner workings of how DAOs are going to work, like how DAOs should work. Why do they work good sometimes? Why don't they work good sometimes? And over the next 4 or 5 years, I think we're going to see a huge shift towards using these coordination mechanics, using these tools basically to build better organizations that create more value and at a higher rate, and then also allow participants to extract a higher concentration of the value that they create from the system. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about what that looks like today. When you go to work for a company, you're lucky if you extract, meaning get paid 25% of the value that you create for the company that you work for. Typically that number ranges from 5% to 15%, meaning for every dollar you take home, you've made $20 or $19 for some other people. And in my opinion, that's why the wealth inequality gap continues to grow. So we need to do better. We need to build organizations that are as efficient, if not more efficient, than corporate organizations, and allow individuals that create and produce value to actually capture a higher quality or a higher amount of that value. So what does that look like in service DAOs? Well, in Raid Guild, you are able to capture 70% of the value that you create. So if you were coming from a business where, like, let's say you're a medical administrator at a hospital, you likely are capturing between 5% and 10% of the value you create. So that's somewhere between 14 times or 7 to 14 times a higher individual value capture rate. And again, I think that a lot of people sort of innately believe that corporations are evil. I don't think that corporations are innately evil. I think that corporations have sort of evolved to be evil, and we can do better. So the corporation has been the dominant has been the dominant organizational technology on the planet for about 300 years or 400 years. And so creating better organizations and coding, programming how incentive structures work within organizations really, in my opinion, represents blockchain's true 0 to 1 moment. That is our horse and buggy to steam train locomotion moment, is when we actually start to build better organizations than corporations. So I'm curious, Penguin, do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, so I think you lay out a really good kind of model of how things have changed and how decentralized things have become. It went from being organizations kind of telling people like this is how it is, and being the foremost experts to kind of crowdsourcing things. I think Code Arena is an amazing example where smart contract developers can learn from people. They can also kind of join together a community that solve a puzzle, and the puzzle that they solve is directly supporting growth in the space. So I think that that's some of the best parts, is like connecting the networks and creating positive sum growth for both parts of the community.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are some of the challenges for getting people to adopt some of the processes? Obviously, communication is difficult, and getting people to learn about things. We saw 1KX talk a little bit about prime rating as well. I think that's a great tool and example. But how do we share kind of all that's happening and all of these different communities that people can be a part of?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things to sort of unpack there. Communication in general has this Dunbar limit thing, which I think probably a lot of people know about, which is essentially that a social group that grows beyond 150 people or so starts to just have communication problems. So in a corporation, that is solved by segmenting different working groups off and having each working group that is composed of 150 people or so has like a manager. And so, that's a larger working group. Within that larger working group, you'll have smaller working groups. And each one of those smaller working groups also has a manager. So, depending on the task, it's usually this kind of factor of Dunbar, which is like maybe 150 people in the larger working group, and then each smaller working group has maybe, let's say, 15 people, and then you have an overall manager that manages just the 10 people that are managing each working group under that. So we have to be careful when we're building these cool new things that we don't sort of pigeonhole ourselves into recreating the same shitty organizational structures that many of us know and hate so very well. But having said that, we still want to take some of the things from corporations that we understand work and figure out how to make them work in horizontal organizations too. So I think that having people that are part of the DAO where their whole role is to stay in touch with a number of different working groups and collect, sort of aggregate and organize what's happening in those groups. So, rather than having a report that gets sent to the CEO, we're just publishing a report for anyone to look at. And keeping good records is probably the most important thing that DAOs can do, honestly.
I think one of the key things that you mentioned, and you might catch if you watch all of MetaFest, is I'm asking people how large their team is, how well they deal with coordination. Because as you say, coordination is very different in a small team versus a large team. And as teams scale, it's important that they have tools and process that they're considering when they're making that process, because uh, it's kind of uncomfortable if you try and think, okay, the team that kind of got us to the initial phase and the ignition is going to be the same team that's there at the finish line. A lot of times, people change, different responsibilities and hats kind of pop up, and definitely things need to scale and be effective at a larger scale. So
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting because I feel like companies are very specific about the role they want a person to fill, and they don't really want you to wear multiple hats. Um, Sometimes that has to do with a quality or consistency issue. They just want the same homogenous level of quality and consistency. But sometimes I think that companies just don't want you to be able to do it on your own. Like they don't want you to be able to put those different hats on and go through that scrappy process that founders do. So, and that's what's interesting about DAOs is DAOs teach people the skill set that is required to be a founder. You know.
yeah, I think yesterday we also Spencer put it really well when he was talking about the decision power and what goes into the actual actions. And the reason that these different groups have managers, even in a decentralized way, Code Arena still has a manager. Someone is proposing the bounty, putting up money. They're managing that bounty, right? Someone gets paid because they completed it to the success of that manage. And then like the execution and evaluation kind of all goes into how people make decisions and actions. And so like
Right.
if the the deciding power is centralized and it's on one or two people to make all the decisions, then it's not as flexible to adjust, to change, or integrate a whole bunch of additional people. The structure's got to kind of support different people that report and kind of share this. But if the decision power is such that it's proposed as a service, right? And the actual goal is to solve the problem, then we can kind of tune services towards what people are doing. So I think that was a great overview of the different tools. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, my friend.